A potential superpower is a sovereign state or other polity that is speculated to be or have the potential to become a superpower. A sovereign state or supranational union that holds a dominant position and can exert influence and project power on a global scale through economic, military, technological, political, or cultural means. The United States is currently considered the world's foremost superpower, as it is the only country whose status as a superpower finds broad consensus, with some accounts explicitly calling it the only one. China has received significant coverage as either a potential or established superpower. The European Union, Russia and India have also been discussed as potential superpowers of the 21st century. Japan was a former candidate in the 1980s. China. The People's Republic of China has arguably received the most consistent coverage in the popular press of its potential superpower status, and has been identified as a rising or emerging economic and military superpower by academics and other experts. One source argued that China certainly presents the most promising all-round profile of a potential superpower, having high economic growth and a large population. According to former U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, China represents the biggest geopolitical test of the 21st century to the United States, as it is the only country with enough power to jeopardize the current global order. There has been great focus on China's growing economic activity on the global stage, in particular where it has been in competition with the United States. For example, the establishment and large-scale expansion in countries joining the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank in contrast to traditional Western institutions, along with the Belt and Road Initiative and China's role in the worldwide groundings of the Boeing 737 MAX. It has also been argued that there is likely to be growing competition in future between two highly dominant countries, the United States and China, while others begin to lag behind economically. It has also been predicted that China may overtake the United States as the world's largest economy in the 2020s. Due to the country's rapidly developing AI industry, China has also been referred to as an AI superpower. But some have questioned how long this pace of economic growth could continue, with emphasis placed not only on China's very large but aging and shrinking population of over 1.4 billion, but also long-term effects of pollution within the country that have accumulated during its fast pace of industrialization. The damage to the country's environment has been extremely costly, mostly due to an inability of poor regions to afford environmental regulations, but also a broader freshwater crisis stemming from inefficient management, pollution, and climate change. China also has yet to prove attractive to skilled immigration from outside the country in the same way other countries like the United States have. A supposed lack of soft power is another aspect of contention to China's status as a potential superpower. The United States military planners considers China as the U.S. most capable and formidable adversary. There has been argument that its ties with Russia and Central Asia could see the Shanghai Cooperation Organization become the NATO of the East. It has also been argued that American absence from the Indo-Pacific region during the War on Terror has allowed the Chinese to actively challenge the United States as the preeminent power in the region. But others have argued that China is still surrounded by potentially hostile nations, and lacks the friends or allies necessary for it to truly compete with the United States. European Union. The European Union, EU, has been called an emerging or current superpower, mainly due to its economic power and global political influence. Factors highlighted have included its large population, the size and global reach of its combined economy, and the comparative unpopularity of U.S. foreign policy. Despite lacking a cohesive military of its own, with military capabilities still in the hands of individual member states, it has been argued that this is irrelevant when considering the status of the EU as a potential superpower. Others disagree, saying that its lack of a unified military structure compared to the United States undermines its claim to be a potential superpower. There have also been conflicting views about the EU's lack of political integration. Some have argued that its lower profile, diplomacy and emphasis on the rule of law represent a new kind of geopolitical influence that fulfills the political requirements for consideration as a superpower, rather than simply failing to meet them. Others, however, argue that its lack of a centralized foreign or defense policy leaves its effectiveness uncertain when compared to that of a more politically integrated union of states such as the United States. And it has even been argued that the EU is little more than an extension of a Europe reliant on or dominated by the United States. The European Union has been called a regulatory superpower due to the Brussels effect, which suggests that regulations and standards applicable in the EU will also be adopted by numerous countries outside the EU over time. Russia, since its imperial times, has been considered both a great power and a regional power. Throughout most of the Soviet era, the Soviet Union was one of the world's two superpowers. However, after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the Russian Federation as its successor state lost its superpower status. In the early 21st century, Russia has been suggested as a potential candidate for resuming superpower status, while others have made the assertion that it is already a superpower. In his 2005 publication entitled Russia in the 21st Century, The Prodigal Superpower, Stephen Rosefield, a professor of economics at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, predicted that Russia would emerge as a superpower before 2010 and augur another arms race. However, Rosefield noted that such an end would come with tremendous sacrifice to global security and the Russian people's freedom. Stephen Kinzer of the Boston Globe compared Russia's actions with its own neighboring territories to those of any other superpower, taking Ukraine and Crimea as examples. Others, however, have put forward more pessimistic views towards Russia's ability to regain its superpower status. A mixed opinion has been offered by Matthew Fleischer of the Los Angeles Times, contending that severe climate change would be necessary for much of Russia's inherent natural resources to become viable. Several analysts commented on the fact that Russia showed signs of an aging and shrinking population. Fred Weir said that this severely constricts and limits Russia's potential to re-emerge as a central world power. In 2011, British historian and professor Niall Ferguson also highlighted the negative effects of Russia's declining population, and suggested that Russia is on its way to global irrelevance. Russia has, however, shown a slight population growth since the late 2000s, partly due to immigration, quickly rising birth rates, slowly declining death rates. Russia's ability to project hard power was also questioned following the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, with the Russian military's poor performance prompting economist Paul Krugman to suggest Russia was little more than a Potemkin superpower. India has seen considerable coverage of its potential of becoming a superpower. Multiple opinions have pointed towards India's rapid economic development as a reason for it to be considered a potential superpower, in particular during the 2010s when it was predicted to outpace China's growth into the future. Some commentators have made the prediction of India becoming a superpower by 2020, most notably based on APJ Abdul Kalam's book India 2020. In 2019, BJP politician Amit Shah claimed that India would emerge as a superpower in the next 5 years under the rule of Narendra Modi. Economists and researchers at Harvard University have projected India's 7% projected annual growth rate through 2024 would continue to put it ahead of China, making India the fastest growing economy in the world. Over and above, India also has the advantage of having a very large and growing young population with a median age of 28, compared to China's median age of 39. In 2003, Goldman Sachs predicted that India would become an economic superpower by 2050. In a 2024 interview with The Independent, former UK PM Tony Blair predicted that by 2050 India would be a global superpower, along with the United States and China. In 2025, former UK PM Rishi Sunak suggested India is an economic superpower. While India's economic growth has continued, some analysts note that inequality remains high and that its trade potential is more limited compared to regional competitors such as China. Although India briefly became the world's fastest-growing major economy in 2015, its growth rate has fallen below China's since 2018. It has also been argued that India's government and bureaucracy is geared against emerging as a superpower, with it being argued that it does very little collective thinking about its long-term foreign policy goals. since most of the strategic planning that takes place within the government happens on an individual level.